Ladies and gentlemen, here's a speech in the style of Andrew Huberman. Fact-based, calm, authoritative, and grounded in a neurobiological and psychological tone with a spiritual edge. On the topic of spiritual justice is a force that operates with precision, yet often without spectacle. Unlike human justice systems, which are loud, visible, and procedural, spiritual justice tends to unfold quietly without announcement or audience. How do we, when someone wrongs you, especially when they do it intentionally without remorse, the natural impulse is to react, to make it right yourself. But there is a reason wisdom traditions, spiritual texts, and even modern psychology often encourage restraint. Not because the wrong done to you doesn't matter, but because something far more sophisticated is already at work. And most of it happens in silence. In the physical world, we're conditioned to expect visible results, see court rulings, apologies, punishments. These are external markers of justice. But in the spiritual dimension, justice begins internally. It takes place first in the heart, the mind, and the soul of the one who caused the harm. It is subtle, but it is unrelenting. When someone causes pain to another, whether through betrayal, manipulation, abuse, or deliberate cruelty, they don't walk away clean. Even if outwardly it appears that they've escaped consequences, there is something sacred in the design of human conscience that ensures they do not escape internally. How do we? You don't need to see their guilt to know it's there. You don't need to hear their apology to know they feel the weight of what they've done. Because guilt, when earned, becomes a seed that doesn't die. It may get buried, it may be denied, but it doesn't go away. Instead, it grows quietly, creating tension in the offender's psyche, unrest in their sleep, unease in their relationships. They may seem unaffected, but within something is shifting. That shift is the first sign that spiritual justice is in motion. We often want evidence, some sign that the person who hurt us is paying for what they did. But spiritual justice doesn't always give us the satisfaction of watching it happen. It doesn't announce itself with lightning bolts or dramatic revelations. It works the way nature does, slowly, steadily, and visibly until suddenly everything changes. Like roots beneath the soil, the consequences take hold before they break the surface. By the time you see the results, the process has been in motion for a long time. And what makes this justice even more powerful is that it doesn't just punish, it teaches. The silence in which spiritual justice operates is not a void, it's a classroom. The person who wrongs you isn't just facing consequences, they are facing themselves. In the stillness, they are forced to encounter the part of themselves they hope to avoid. The harm they cause becomes a mirror they cannot escape. That kind of justice doesn't just correct behavior. It has the power to transform character. But it does so slowly, often painfully, and always quietly. You may never witness this transformation. You may never get the closure you think you need. But that's not a sign that nothing is happening. It's a sign that something deeper is. Closure is not always found in confrontation. Often it is found in trust. The trust that something beyond you is setting things right in ways you cannot fully understand. Spiritual justice is not about revenge or punishment. It's about restoration. It's about balance being restored in a way that protects your peace and allows growth on both sides, even if the other person never returns to admit their fault. Ironically, the silence of spiritual justice also protects you. When you let go of your need to witness their suffering, you free yourself from the energy of pain. You stop orbiting around their actions. You step out of the storm and into calm. That calm is not passivity. It is alignment. It is where healing happens. And often it is your healing, not their suffering. That becomes the clearest evidence that justice is unfolding. There is something sacred about not having to retaliate. Something powerful about being able to say, I don't need to see them fall. I just need to rise. Because when you rise as proof that pain didn't win. You rise as evidence that what was meant harm you only refined you. And in that rising, justice is complete. Not with noise, but with quiet authority. In the end, a spiritual justice rarely shows up when we expect it, but it always arrives. And when it does, it speaks not with thunder, but with stillness. A stillness that says you were seen, you were heard, and more importantly, you were never alone. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when a person experiences a conflict between their actions and their beliefs or values. This conflict creates an uncomfortable tension, which the individual will subconsciously work to resolve. The key I hear is that when someone does something that contradicts their sense of right or wrong, they experience a mental and emotional discomfort that pushes them toward one of two responses. They either change their behavior or they change their beliefs to justify the behavior. When someone harms you, betrays you, manipulates you, or acts maliciously toward you, this conflict doesn't just affect you, it also affects them. The person who wronged you, whether they are consciously aware of it or not, is now dealing with the fallout of their own actions on a psychological level. They may not show it immediately, and they may try to bury it deep beneath their layers of denial, but this cognitive dissonance is a natural response to the act they've committed. It's important to understand that regardless of the outward appearance of calm or indifference, the individual is wrestling with their own inner turmoil. The first sign of cognitive dissonance emerging in is often an attempt to rationalize their actions. They may begin to create justifications, no matter how flimsy, for what their mind. The act of betrayal or harm may be reinterpreted as something necessary, perhaps even justified. They might convince themselves that they were in the right or that you deserved what happened. This is their subconscious attempt to relieve the discomfort caused by their conflicting emotions. Their internal justification is their defense mechanism against the dissonance, the tension between their actions and their moral compass. At first, this rationalization might seem convincing. How do we, even to them? After all, they're not facing the immediate consequence of their actions. You may have forgiven them, or they may have seen no outward consequences for their behavior. But deep down, the truth remains that their actions still contradict their own sense of what is right. This internal conflict doesn't go away, no matter how much they try to suppress it. It seeps into their daily thoughts and behaviors over time. The rationalizations become less effective and the dissonance grows louder. As the dissonance intensifies, they may start to exhibit signs of anxiety, restlessness, or even aggression. The mental strain of holding two contradictory beliefs, on one hand, believing they are a good person, and on the other, knowing they hurt someone, creates a stress response. Their body begins to react to this tension. They may experience sleeplessness, irritability, or a general unease seems to stem from nowhere. In some cases, they may turn this inner turmoil outward, directing anger or frustration at you, even though you are no longer the source of their discomfort. They are simply lashing out at the emotional weight they are carrying. How do we? Trying to deflect the responsibility they feel for their actions. The dissonance also affects their ability to connect with others in a genuine way. People who harm others often struggle to maintain meaningful relationships, not just with the person they wronged, but with others around them as well. The dissonance interferes with their ability to empathize, to trust, or to feel at peace with themselves. If they can't reconcile their actions, they'll carry a sense of disconnection from the world around them. They may appear socially distant or emotionally unavailable. How do we, as the guilt and self-justification, keep them trapped in their own mental maze? As time goes on, the dissonance continues to affect their decisions and their self-image. How do we, if they cannot fully resolve the conflict between their behavior and their internal values, it may manifest in self-destructive behaviors. They might engage in unhealthy habits or push away people who truly care about them. The weight of the unresolved conflict becomes too heavy to bear, and instead of addressing the root of their issues, they choose temporary distractions or unhealthy coping mechanisms. Eventually, the discomfort of cognitive dissonance may force the person to confront their actions, especially if the dissonance becomes so intense that it threatens their sense of self. They may start to feel the need to make amends or apologize, not because they necessarily want to, but because they realize that the inner turmoil cannot continue without causing further harm to their psyche. The apology, if it comes, often a sign that the dissonance has become unbearable. It's a recognition that the harm they've caused is too great to simply ignore anymore, and that reconciliation might be the only way to alleviate the psychological burden they are carrying. However, not all offenders will reach this point. Some may continue to deny their role in the harm they caused, maintaining the cognitive dissonance by further distorting the truth. But even then, the dissonance is working, forcing them to live with a fragmented sense of self. Over time, this inner conflict eats away at their mental peace and can lead to a variety of emotional, relational, and even physical consequences. In the grand scheme of things, the person who wronged you is not going unpunished. The punishment is not always visible, nor is it a punishment you get to see with your own eyes. Instead, it's an internal battle that they cannot escape. It's the ongoing struggle between who they want to believe they are and who their actions have proven them to be. And that struggle is a punishment far greater than any external consequence you could impose. When someone causes harm to another, whether intentionally or not, the consequences of their actions ripple out beyond just the relationship with the person they have hurt. One of the most significant, yet often unseen, outcomes of harmful behavior is a gradual erosion of the individual's influence or reputation. In a world driven by social dynamics, trust, and the desire to be respected, a person's reputation is an essential part of their identity. It impacts how they are perceived, how they interact with others, and the opportunities they receive. However, when someone betrays another, this core aspect of their identity is jeopardized. Over time, the loss of influence or reputation becomes a powerful sign that the consequence of their actions are being dealt with, often in ways that are subtle but undeniable. Initially, the person may not see the immediate fallout of their behavior. They may not notice that their reputation is beginning to shift or that their influence is waning. The reason for this is simple. Harm and betrayal, especially when it comes from people they trust or interact with regularly, can initially go unnoticed. They might maintain the outward appearance of their life, keeping up with their social circles, career, or daily routines as though nothing has changed. However, as time passes, the damage starts to show in smaller, often invisible ways. One of the earliest signs of influence loss is the subtle shift in how others treat the person who has caused harm. In a professional setting, it may begin with colleagues distancing themselves or withholding support. In personal relationships, friends may start pulling away or acquaintances may become more guarded. Initially, this can be overlooked as people often maintain a facade of civility in public. But when the harm caused is significant enough, these social distancing behaviors grow more pronounced. People may start avoiding the individual who has wronged others, even if this avoidance isn't immediately obvious. This distancing serves as an unconscious rejection of the person's character and, in many cases, the harm they have inflicted. As these subtle changes accumulate, the individual may begin to notice and trust they once had is eroding. They may find that people no longer listen to them as attentively, or that their opinions are dismissed more frequently. Their suggestions or ideas might no longer carry the weight they once did, and they begin to sense that their influence is slipping away. This loss is often felt most acutely in situations where they are trying to assert authority or garner support, and they find that others no longer respond in kind. Where there was once admiration or trust, there is now skepticism or indifference. This decline in influence doesn't happen overnight. It builds over time, often in ways that are slow and subtle. It could be the result of people gossiping about the person's past actions behind their back, or it could be a matter of others quietly withdrawing their support and no longer providing opportunities or networking advantages. People are naturally inclined to trust those who act with integrity, and when that trust is broken, it's difficult to rebuild. Even when the individual tries to mend fences or offer apologies, their actions may still resonate in the memories of those they have wronged, leaving a lasting impression that can't be easily erased. In some cases, the loss of influence and reputation can even affect the person's career. In professional settings, a tarnished reputation can lead to missed promotions, fewer opportunities for advancement, and even a diminished role within their industry. People who have hurt others may find that their credibility is questioned and their professional networks shrink. Their colleagues may begin to doubt their judgment, and their ability to lead or collaborate effectively is compromised. In extreme cases, this decline in reputation may even lead to the loss of clients, projects, or clients, further stripping away their influence and social standing. The loss of influence is not limited to social circles or professional environments. It can affect their family and personal relationships as well. Family members may begin to view them with suspicion or wariness, no longer offering the same level of trust or intimacy. Relationships that once seemed secure can start to unravel, and the individual may find themselves isolated. This isolation becomes more painful over time as the person who has wronged others begins to realize that their behavior has led them to lose not only the trust of others, but their connection to the very people they need most. The most profound aspect of loss of influence and reputation is that it often goes unnoticed by the one experiencing it until it reaches a tipping point. This person may be caught off guard. Unable to understand why they are suddenly being treated differently or why opportunities have begun to dry up. They might continue to justify their actions, believing that they have been wronged or misunderstood. Yet the truth remains that their behavior has left a lasting imprint on others, one that is difficult to undo. Interestingly, the loss of reputation and influence is often the most effective form of divine or spiritual justice because it occurs without the individual's direct involvement. It doesn't require anyone to enact punishment or retribution. Rather, it is a natural consequence of their actions. The loss of respect, credibility, and influence works quietly in the background, ensuring that the person who has hurt others is subtly held accountable for their actions. In many ways, this loss is more powerful than any external consequence because it forces the individual to reckon with their own behavior. Without influence or reputation, they are left to face their true self. And as they experience the effects of their actions, perhaps the isolation, the rejection, the missed opportunities, they begin to understand the cost of their behavior. The gradual erosion of influence is a slow, often painful form of justice, but it is effective in making clear that every action has consequences and every wrong carries with it a price that cannot be avoided. When someone wrongs you, especially in a profound or intentional way, the consequences of their actions extend far beyond just the relationship between the two of you. One of the most significant, yet often unnoticed, outcomes of betrayal or harm is the disruption of the offender's internal peace. While they may seem unaffected or indifferent on the surface, the truth is that when a person inflicts harm, it creates a ripple of turmoil within their own psyche. This disruption is inevitable and powerful. Even though it may not be immediately visible, it affects them in ways that are deep and long-lasting. The first indication of this internal disruption is often an underlying sense of unease or restlessness. The person who has caused harm may not always be able to identify what is wrong, but they begin to feel an absence of calm that they once took for granted. It might manifest in a feeling of being unsettled, as if something within them has been disturbed. This unease is not always associated with guilt or remorse initially. Instead, it could be an overall sense of discomfort that they cannot easily explain. It's a quiet tension that builds inside them, affecting their thoughts and emotions. The body and mind are inextricably linked, and when a person's internal peace is disrupted, it often shows up physically. They may experience increased levels of stress, anxiety, or even physical symptoms like headaches, tight in the chest, or difficulty sleeping. In some cases, maybe because their nervous system is on high alert, constantly processing the emotional and psychological stress caused by the harm they have inflicted. The body, which is designed to maintain balance, now faces an imbalance that they cannot easily resolve. This internal discord creates a cascade of physiological responses as the person's mind struggles to come to terms with their actions while their body struggles to process the emotional toll. Emotionally, the person who has caused harm may find themselves vacillating between different states of mind. At one moment, they might feel defensive, justifying their actions and rationalizing their behavior. In the next, they may experience flashes of guilt or regret, even if they refuse to fully acknowledge them. The mind cannot simply sweep the wrongdoing under the rug without consequence. The unresolved tension lingers in their emotional landscape, and over time, it becomes increasingly difficult to suppress. This emotional roller coaster can be exhausting, leading to feelings of frustration, irritability, and confusion. The person may struggle to find peace in their relationships at work or within themselves because the turmoil continues to cloud their thoughts and judgments. One of the most telling signs of this internal disruption is the person's difficulty in finding true rest. While they may appear to be going about their daily lives as usual, the absence of inner peace begins to take a toll on their ability to relax or rejuvenate. Sleep may become restless or elusive as the mind continues to replay the actions that caused harm. Even in moments of solitude or quiet, their thoughts may return to the wrong they committed, creating a sense of constant agitation. This lack of true rest is both physical and psychological manifestation of the internal conflict they are experiencing. It is a sign that their actions have disrupted the balance within themselves, and the peace they once took for granted is now elusive. The disruption in their internal peace also affects their relationships with others as they struggle with their own internal conflict. They may become more withdrawn or distant. They might feel unable to connect with others on a meaningful level as their own self-doubt and unease prevent them from engaging authentically. This withdrawal can cause them to isolate themselves further, perpetuating the cycle of internal unrest. They may also exhibit irritability or emotional volatility as the unresolved tension inside them leaks into their interactions with those around them. People might notice a change in their demeanor, sensing that something is amiss, even if the person has not openly acknowledged it. Over time, this can lead to further breakdowns in their relationships as the emotional distance grows wider. In some cases, the disruption in internal peace may even lead to a form of self-punishment. The person may become caught in a loop of self-criticism, condemning themselves for their actions and attempting to atone for their wrongdoings. This self-punishment can manifest in unhealthy coping mechanisms such as overworking, substance abuse, or self-destructive behavior. They may subconsciously feel that deserve the inner chaos they are experiencing, and in an attempt to alleviate the tension, they turn to ways that only further complicate their emotional landscape. This internal disruption is not something that can be easily ignored or suppressed indefinitely. Over time, the person may be forced to confront the consequences of their actions, whether they choose to do so willingly or not. The longer the internal turmoil remains unaddressed, the more difficult it becomes to ignore. It eventually forces them to face the reality of their behavior, and this confrontation can be a painful process. The disruption in their peace is a constant reminder that something is wrong, that they are living in a state of imbalance, and that the only way to find true peace is to make amends, seek forgiveness, or take responsibility for their actions. In the end, the disruption of their internal peace serves as an undeniable form of spiritual justice. It is a reminder that the harm they have does not simply vanish. It becomes embedded in their own psyche. It is not something they can escape, but rather something they must learn to address. This internal struggle is a powerful force, one that often works far more effectively than any external consequence. While they may not immediately recognize it, the turmoil they experience is part of the process of transformation, forcing them to confront their wrongs and seek peace, not just with others, but with themselves. When you've been wronged by someone, it can feel as though the weight of injustice lies solely on your shoulders. Your emotions, hurt, confusion, can seem overwhelming, and your natural instinct may be to demand restitution, to confront the person who hurt you, or to find some way to restore balance. But as time passes, you might begin to realize that the most profound response you can have to the harm done to you is not one of retaliation, but of detachment. By stepping back emotionally and mentally from the situation, you create a space where you are no longer bound by the actions of the one who wronged you. In this detachment, something powerful begins to happen. The very distance you create from the offender becomes a mirror that reflects back to them the consequences of their actions. When you detach, you stop engaging with their behavior in the same way. You no longer react, no longer allow their actions to steer your emotions, and you stop giving them the power to dictate your peace. It's not about dismissing the hurt or pretending it didn't matter, but rather reclaiming your sense of self and regaining your inner balance. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding the cycle of negativity that their actions may have triggered. And this shift has a profound effect on the person who wronged you. In essence, your detachment becomes a mirror for them. As you withdraw emotionally and mentally from the situation, they are faced with the reality of their actions in a way they cannot avoid. This lack of engagement forces them to confront their behavior. They can no longer hide behind their justifications, excuses, or rationalizations. When you no longer react, they are left to face themselves, without the distraction of your emotions or responses. The space you create through your detachment reflects back to them the void that their actions have caused. They can no longer project their guilt, shame, or insecurity onto you. And in that silence, they must reckon with their own conscience. At first, this may not be immediately apparent to them. People who cause harm often do so without realizing the full scope of their actions. They may believe that their hurtful behavior has gone unnoticed or that they can move on without facing the consequences. But as you detach, the impact of their actions becomes more pronounced. The absence of your emotional reaction leaves them with only their own guilt and self-awareness. It's almost as if you stop participating in their story of victimhood or blame, and instead, they must tell their own story to themselves. The detachment you've cultivated turns into a mirror that shows them not just the pain they've caused, but the nature of their character. When you detach, you also stop enabling their behavior. You no longer play the role of the person they can manipulate or guilt trip. People who have wronged others often rely on those they've hurt to feel validated, to feel as though they are not as bad as they fear they are. They may test boundaries, provoke reactions, or even try to twist the situation to make you feel responsible for their actions. But when you stop reacting to these attempts, when you refuse to engage with their need for validation, you strip away their ability to manipulate the situation. This emotional detachment reveals their own vulnerabilities, their need to control the narrative, and their fear of facing the truth. And this mirror can be incredibly unsettling. The process of detachment doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent to the person who wronged you. Rather, it means you've learned to go of the emotional entanglement with their actions. It's a sign of personal strength, a demonstration that you no longer need their approval, their apology, or their acknowledgement to find peace. By doing this, you stop feeding into the energy of negativity and hurt, creating a vacuum where their actions no longer have the power to affect your emotional state. In doing so, you force them to experience the consequences of their own behavior. For the person who hurt you, this detachment is often a difficult pill to swallow. They are used to the emotional exchanges that come with relationships, whether they are interactions filled with love, conflict, or even manipulation. When you stop engaging with them emotionally, it feels as though the ground beneath them has shifted. The absence of your presence, your reaction, and your energy causes them to face themselves in a way they may not have been prepared for. This may prompt them to reflect on their actions, their motivations, and the impact they've had on others. It is in this space of reflection that they are likely to see the full extent of the harm they have caused. For some, this mirror can be a source of growth and transformation. The detachment you created can help them realize the error of their ways and encourage them to change. However, for others, it can be a deeply uncomfortable and even disorienting experience. They may feel rejected, abandoned, or misunderstood, but this discomfort is part of the process. They must face the consequences of their actions without the emotional crutch of your reactions. It forces them to reckon with their behavior, their character, and the values they hold. For many, this is a painful process, but it's also one that leads to self-awareness. Ultimately, your detachment serves as a form of spiritual justice. It doesn't rely on you seeking revenge, demanding an apology, or attempting to force the other person to face the harm they've caused. Instead, it simply allows the natural consequences of their actions to unfold. The more you detach from their influence, the clearer the reflection becomes for them. They are left with their own conscience, their own thoughts, and the undeniable awareness of what they've done. Whether they choose to acknowledge it or not, this mirror effect is an undeniable force that serves to show them the truth of their actions in a way that words or confrontation never could. When you've been wronged by someone, the pain and injustice can often make you feel as if you're stuck in a battle, one that revolves around holding on to the hurt, seeking justice, or attempting to make them understand the consequences of their actions. However, as time passes and you focus on your healing and personal growth, something remarkable begins to happen. Your growth, the way you rise above the pain and continue to evolve, becomes a silent yet powerful form of conviction for the person who has hurt you. It's not about seeking revenge or proving them wrong, but rather about living in a way that shows them the truth of their actions and the transformation that occurs when you choose healing over bitterness. When someone harms you, they might expect you to remain stuck in a place of hurt, anger, or sorrow. They might anticipate that you'll stay emotionally entangled in the situation, reacting to every provocation and dwelling on what has happened. However, when you decide to move forward, to grow and heal in spite of the wrong done to you, you break the cycle that they anticipated. This growth, whether it's emotional, spiritual, or even physical, becomes a powerful reflection of your strength. The more you focus on bettering yourself, the more you shine a light on the emptiness of their actions. Your growth shows them that they have no control over you. People who harm others often do so because they want to assert some level of power or dominance over the situation. They may believe that by hurting you, they can manipulate your emotional state or provoke a reaction that keeps you trapped in their narrative. However, when you choose to grow instead of staying in a state of reaction, you take back your power. This shift doesn't require you to confront them or even acknowledge their behavior. It simply requires you to live in a way that reflects your inner strength and resilience. The person who wronged you may begin to feel the weight of their actions as they watch you move on and thrive without them. This contrast between your growth and their actions serves as a quiet yet powerful form of conviction. It's not something you have to say or force upon them. It simply exists in the way you live your life. When someone wrongs you, especially if it's a significant betrayal, they may expect you to falter, to sink into despair, or to become bitter. But when you rise above it, you send an undeniable messaging. You are not defined by the wrongs that have been done to you. This in itself becomes a source of deep discomfort for the one who hurt you. They may not immediately recognize or acknowledge it, but the contrast between where you are now and where you were before they hurt you serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of their actions. What makes this even more significant is that your growth does not require you to force them to acknowledge their wrongdoing. There's no need for you to demand an apology, seek revenge, or try to convince them that they were wrong. Instead, the process of your healing and growth becomes their conviction by simply existing in your own truth. They see you move forward, perhaps even succeed in areas of life they didn't expect, and it forces them to reckon with what they did. Every step you take toward bettering yourself reflects the stark reality that their actions had a tangible effect on someone else. It is in your growth that they must face the truth about themselves and the harm they caused. In many cases, those who hurt others are deeply invested in avoiding the uncomfortable truth about their behavior. They may justify their actions, minimize the hurt they've caused, or even blame others for the situation. But as you grow, these justifications become less and less effective. Your progress, your transformation, and in your continued pursuit of a better life are a form of spiritual truth they cannot avoid. Your ability to heal, to move on, and to continue with your life as a stronger version of yourself forces them to confront the impact of their actions. They are no longer in control of the narrative. Your personal growth becomes the mirror that shows them the weight of their behavior and the emotional consequences of their choices. Moreover, your growth is not just an emotional shift, it's often a holistic transformation, whether it's your career, relationships, health, or mindset. The more you evolve, the clearer it becomes that the person who hurt you no longer holds any power over you. You are moving forward with a new sense of direction, and this shift is often felt by the person who wronged you, even if they won't admit it. They may begin to feel a sense of guilt, shame, or regret, even if they try to suppress it. Your growth exposes the fact that they no longer have the power to control or define you. In that exposure, their conviction takes root. Sometimes this conviction might lead them to reflect on their actions more deeply. They may even apologize, realizing that they can't undo the harm they've caused, but they now see the consequences of their behavior. For others, however, your growth will remain a silent reminder of their own failings. Whether or not they choose to acknowledge it, the fact remains that your healing and success become undeniable proof that they have harmed someone who was strong enough to rise above it. Ultimately, your growth becomes an ongoing testament to your strength and resilience. It doesn't matter if the person who wronged you ever acknowledges it. The fact that you continue to move forward in life, that you continue to pursue your goals and dreams, becomes a powerful statement that no one can take away from you. And for the person who hurt you, this will often become a source of quiet conviction. Your growth forces them to confront the truth of their actions, not through confrontation or judgment, but through the simple, undeniable reality of your transformation. Whether they accept it or not, they are faced with the consequences of their own behavior. And in the process, you become the living proof that healing and growth are always possible, no matter the harm that has been done.